Right, hello and welcome. This is a A2 OCR economics video. We're continuing with the leisure side of the course today. This is a bit of a short video, as it's just sort of summing together a few things. Well, I forgot to mention, I just prefer to put in a different video. As you can tell, we're going to talk about internal and external economies and diseconomies of scale. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through what each of them is. I'm going to say what happens to the long run average cost curve in terms of shifting or movements along it, etc. And then afterwards I'll give you some examples of each of the four types, the two variations of internal and external being diseconomies and economies. So if you're, I don't know how you want to lay out this recap of this video, if you're copying it down on paper, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to split my imaginary piece of paper, which I like to call a board, into four sections, because obviously we're going to have a section for internal, external economies and diseconomies of scale. So on the left, if you want to put internal economies of scale, and then below that, if you want to put internal diseconomies of scale. So your left hand side of the board is just converted with your internal economies and diseconomies of scale. Or you could put these in any part of the board paper you wanted to. This, can't even do it anymore. Diseconomies of scale. Now if you want to be cast while I'm writing these in, if you're copying them down, you wait for me to do it. You have to think about what we meant when we were talking about economies and diseconomies of scale. So I'll just finish off this and then I'll go through that. So internal economies of scale. So in your four sections of your board, you should have your internal diseconomies and economies of scale, your external economies of scale, and your external diseconomies of scale. Okay, so what I said there is I just sort of tried to get you thinking about what economies of scale actually meant. That's when we have an increasing return. So we have increasing return. So what that means is if we put in a given percentage of inputs, we will get a larger percentage return on their outputs. That's increasing, and that's economies of scale, and that's when the long run average costs decrease. And diseconomies of scale is obviously the opposite of that, where we put in a given percentage of change to the inputs, and we get a smaller return. So we're losing out essentially on some efficiency, if you can think of it like that. Okay, so right, that's what economies of scale and diseconomies of scale. We're fine with that. But what does this internal and external mean? Well, if we're doing it from the idea of a firm, internal is anything in the business and external is anything outside the business. Now we need to be a bit more specific than that. That's the general consensus. So internal, I've just said, that is something to do with the firm. Now I'm not going to write it down yet because I want to sort of get your mind to explain. Actually, I was going to, but changed my mind. Crazy guy. Your external, obviously, it's outside the firm, and now the only things we'd be considered with being outside the firm is the industry. That's because obviously F583 is about this side of the leisure course. We're looking at the airline industry or the cinema industry, just to name a few. So obviously when we're talking about internal, we're talking about in the business, when the business is growing and the industry isn't. And the external is when the firm is not changing size but the industry is. Okay, so how does this relate to economies of scale? So we said what external is, we said what internal is, and we have said in the past what economies and diseconomies of scale is. Okay, so write down what we know so far in each of these little boxes as sort of a little bullet point. So internal, we know that's when, so you could write this for both in both of these, but I'm just going to focus on internal economies of scale for the moment. So internal, that's when we know when the business is growing. Sorry. Firm. You could put business. Firm is growing, but the market is staying relatively stable. But the industry isn't. So the firm is growing, but the industry is not. Okay, so that's the internal bit sorted out. Now what's the economies of scale? Now we said economies of scale, we talked about the increase in return, but the main thing was the long run average costs are decreasing. So what does this mean in terms of internal economies of scale? It's very good saying the long run average cost decrease, but if we're talking about the curve, what actually happens to the curve? Well, in the internal part, when we're talking about internal economies of scale, then there is a movement. Let me just there's a movement along the long run average cost curve. Now, if we cast our minds back, I'm just going to draw a quick sketch. You might want to do this in each one of your little sections of your piece of paper, but obviously we're going to write a few things, sort of copy this first little bit of information and then add a diagram to it. So we're just going to replicate this in terms of each one of these. That's why I've split into 4 parts. So we said it's the long run average costs are falling, and because it's internal, then we are moving along the LRAC curve. And that's because we're only considered with one firm. We're not considered with the whole of the industry. We're just considered with one firm. So I'm not going to draw the helixes. I'm just going to draw the long run average cost curve. I'm not going to draw all the little short run average cost curves, because I'm just going to draw a quick sketch. Obviously yours would be a bit more detailed with your Q star there, but I'm not going to put that in. So basically we could be at this point A and we move into that point B. So that's a movement along increasing our output level and decreasing our costs. Okay, so that's a sort of a quick sketch because I'm trying to sort of just emulate the important bits there. Okay, so we're just moving from A to B on that one. And obviously then we have the external economies of scale is actually the next one I'm going on to change my mind. So we said in economies of scale, yes, the long run average costs are falling, but in terms of the difference between these two, is this is external, this is internal. Now we said external is when the industry is growing, and internal is when the firm is growing. So obviously this external bit is going to be when the industry is growing. This is the industry that the firm is in, but I'm just going to put the industry is growing. And obviously, again, because it's economies of scale, the long run average cost is going to be decreasing. But as this is the whole of the industry, we're actually going to be shifting the LRAC. And because this is economies of scale, as we said, the costs are falling. So it's not going to shift outwards, it's going to sort of shift inwards. So shifting of the LRAC curve, and obviously this is going to be sort of inwards of a shift. Okay, so I'm just going to again draw the same sort of thing. I'm not going to label my diagram, but hopefully by now you should know the labels. So I'm going to call one curve the LRAC curve, and this is going to obviously shift to the LRAC1. And you could put a point there, A, which is now shifted to B. Sorry. So it's quite a little bit of pressure, but you're not even here. Basically this A output should fall before the B output. So basically, we've still got the cost decreasing cost, and an increase output. I need to sort it out properly. It's just irritating me a little bit. So hopefully you can see the difference in what I was trying to explain to you there. Obviously I could draw the, as I said, I could draw the short run average cost curves in each one of them, but I think it's a bit more simple just to explain it to you in that manner. Okay, so then we've got eternal diseconomies of scale. Now if we cast our minds back to this, we said in internal the firm is growing but the industry is not, and now these are both internal, so we're both going to have that. So however, this is so it's diseconomies of scale, so it's still increasing, it's not decreasing in size. So the industry is growing, but the firm, well, you could just put the industry is growing, you don't need to put that little bit there. And then what we said on this one is we said the long run average costs are falling, but as we know in diseconomies of scale, that's when your return is decreasing. So if you put a percentage of change to the inputs, you get a smaller percentage change to the outputs. So you're still going to increase them, but a smaller proportion to your initial increase of inputs. So your long run average costs are actually going to be increasing. Now they're still internal, so we're still going to be moving along the long run average cost curve, but as we said, our costs are going to be increasing, and the only point you can move along the long run average cost curve for the cost to be increasing is after what we'd assume to be Q star, which should be somewhere down here, which is a minimum efficient scale, by the way, is what we generally refer to it. And if you don't get what I'm going on about the minimum efficient scale and Q star, then please do watch my previous video about this, just a recap. So, as we were saying, I'm going to draw the curve again. So, assuming there's going to be cost here and output, I don't need to write that again. I'm just going to draw a long run average cost curve. Again, this is not going to be perfectly accurate because A, you've not got a rule, and B, I'm not in an exam at the moment, so doesn't matter. This is going to be perfect. And we said the long run average cost is increasing, and there is a movement along, and obviously you could put a there, no, could actually get on the curve, and B there, and if we correspond these with output levels, yes, the output was increased here, but if we correspond these with costs, so put that across, then we can see, yes, our output is increased, but we've actually got an increasing costs. Okay, so I'll try to do that on a slant so you can see as I'm explaining it. Okay, so the only one we haven't done in that section there is the eternal. I could put eternal then, for God's sake. The only one we've not done, as I said, is the external diseconomies of scale. Now, if we cast our minds back to what we said about the external economies of scale, they're both external. So, in both of these situations or scenarios, the industry is going to be growing. So the industry, so if you want to note that down, the industry is growing. However, like this one here, this is why I put it on the bottom, the long run average cost curves, long run average costs are increasing. However, if we refer to the external economies of scale, because these are both external, what happens to the long run average cost curve is actually going to shift, because this shifts here, both external, and because the industry is growing in both of these, you can think of these as the long run average aggregate supply curve, where if the industry changes, there's an actual physical movement of the curve. And that's the way I think of it. If it confuses you, just ignore that. So the external diseconomies of scale. Now we said, again, the shift of the curve, but it's going to be shifting outwards, so an increase in shift, if that makes sense, of the curve. Okay, so if we draw our diagram again, so the same sort of diagram. I mean, it's just going to be a bit rubbish because so it's just going to be the opposite of the above. That shouldn't actually touch the bottom. It's a rubbish diagram. Sorry, one sec. Because I'm trying to make it sort of obvious for you. So that's the LRAC. And just put above it some curve that's slightly higher but represents the same sort of thing. Sorry. Damn it. Okay, so that's hopefully represents the kind of thing we were talking about. So just give you a minute there to mull over that. Just get out of the way and hopefully I can explain it a little bit better. So we talked about the internal, so a few things to pick up from this these diagrams. The internal is where there's actually a movement along the curve, it's not shifting. And obviously the external is where the curve shifts, and that's because the external is where the industry is changing, but where the firm is changing in the internal, because we're concerned with the inside of the business, and the external is the outside of the business. The internal doesn't shift the curve, but the external does. And then we correspond it with our economies of scale. Now we should know economies of scale is on the left hand side of the long run average cost curve. So any movement along that is going to be down there, the side, and anything to the right is going to be diseconomies of scale. I did recap a few times what economies and diseconomies of scale was, but I'll just go over it again in case for those of you who aren't paying attention or just got bored of my voice at some point, which is believable. The economies of scale, that's when we said we had a increasing return, and a decreasing return is when we had diseconomies of scale. The increasing return means essentially we get more back, so more output than we change for inputs, and diseconomies of scale is the opposite of that. So we got a smaller output than percentage change in output than we got for a percentage change in input, as you can see by the diagrams there. Hopefully that represents kind of what I was just saying then. That's about it, just for the diagrams. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just stand a little bit to the side of the board, and just so you can keep your eyes on that, I'm just going to grab my notes. So the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to just come up with some random examples, because I've got some good examples here. Just to make sure you can still see that actually. So as I said, I'm just going to go through some examples, just making sure you can, hopefully you can still see that. Okay, so, one sec, let me just double check, yep. So I'm just double checking there. Okay, so we said about, I'm going to start with internal economies of scale. Okay, so I did recap the diagram on the board, so hopefully I don't need to do that again. Some examples here. So internal economies of scale, this is when the firm is growing and the industry isn't. So there's a couple of examples we could use. One is purchasing. So if you relate this to the cinema industry, when you go to the cinema, generally they try and rob all your money first when you buy your ticket. But if you've got some change after that, they'll happily make another £5 off you for some popcorn. And now they say they try and sell that as cheaply as possible, which is a load of old tosh. But the point of this is basically if they're going to open more restaurants, the price they charge, I wouldn't be surprised. So basically, if they open more cinema chains, so basically if they open more, have more screens in a cinema, there's going to be more people coming to the cinema. And if we're talking about economies of scale, basically that's when unit costs decrease. They're going to be buying more popcorn in to reduce their overall unit costs. So unit cost being the total cost of a unit sold or produced. And obviously that would equate to economies of scale. Another example of internal economies of scale could be in terms of your technical side of the business. So basically, if you're increasing your output, a larger firm can make better use of its resources. So in terms of the technical, we're talking about machinery here. And if there's division of labour, so if people are using different bits of the machinery as the business increases in its capacity output, then obviously that increased productivity, which increases output, and as we know, you're paying the worker the same wage to do an increased amount. Obviously that drives down your unit costs. An example of this of an airline industry, basically there's two major planes that they use. One's the Airbus A380 and the other is the Boeing 747. Now the Airbus A380 is substantially larger with a 34% increase in passenger capacity compared to the Boeing 747. Yet it doesn't cost 34% more than the Boeing 747. Hence, obviously, it's cheaper per passenger, and obviously you're going to be charging on the same price. So obviously you're going to increase your profits on that. External economies of scale. Obviously the industry is growing and there's a shift of the long run average cost curve. Now an example of this is basically, if this is when the industry is growing. Now if this industry is growing, they're going to be requiring skills for this. A good example of this is the tourism industry at the moment. Now if there's a demand for people with these skills, then colleges and universities will start offering this course to people who otherwise might not have thought of it, because they need the jobs, and obviously you need people coming through the ranks with these skills that they've acquired over the years. And obviously if there's a demand for this industry, then people will be trained, and if people are going to be trained from an early age, of the businesses and paying for this training, the individual is paying for this training, or if they're younger than 18, then the government is paying for the training, obviously. Okay, so so as I said, if there's a demand for I think that the workers to be more productive and reduce unit costs. So basically, them two there, both about the end example is going to be about reducing unit costs. So just to go over that again, the internal economies, an example is cinema chains ordering more popcorn to rip you off. The technical one of that is basically machinery, and the people are more trained, better at using this machinery because there's a firm getting larger, there's more people being able to use it, division of labour, etc. The external economies of scale, that's when we said about the skill being required and the workers being more productive because they're already trained from an earlier age and the business isn't paying for this, so I quite like that one. Another one for external, you don't need to worry about this so much, is the infrastructure, basically roads, buildings, etc. If there is an interest in the sector from there's a growth in the sector, it will attract not only public and private sector investment, not only public private sector investment as well, I'm going to say. Basically, it will increase the network links to this area, and if there's increased network links, then obviously it's going to be cheaper for transport costs, which will decrease unit costs and relate to your economies of scale. Okay, so the bottom two, which is a little bit more difficult now. Actually, I don't think internal diseconomies is. So basically, as we say, when we get past when the curve starts increasing, sort of on that point there, after Q star, what you'd imagine to be Q star. Basically, as the business gets bigger, you're going to need to employ more people. They're going to need to increase their levels of hierarchy in the business, which again, if you've done business, will help. And obviously, if there's an increased layer of hierarchy, the child game Chinese Whispers is a good example of this. If you've got the manager right at the top and he's communicating, saying that he wants the workers to work on a Friday, by the time it gets to them, they'll think, oh, I have to come in on a Friday because the message will have changed that much. But hopefully that's explained it a little bit. That's one of the examples there. Management control kind of goes on that from span of control. If there's one manager that was originally managing just two people, as their firm gets bigger, because they need to increase the layers of hierarchy, obviously they're going to be in charge of more people, more delinquents. Oh, that's bad. Never mind. So basically, the span of control increases. Each manager is now responsible for more workers. And if they're responsible for more workers, obviously they don't have an increased amount of time. So they've got less time on each one of them workers if they don't want to, if they want to get home, which obviously managers do. So if a manager is spending less time with each worker, then it's quite a good assumption to make that the workers will become less motivated. And if they're less motivated, the key result of that is they will be less willing and wanting to put a bit more, go the extra mile, as it were. And obviously that would decrease productivity, increase unit costs, which relates to the increase in this curve. So just give that again, we said about communication, management, so communication in terms of it getting distorted and takes longer to sort something out, which drives up unit costs, and then management control, which is the workers feeling not as motivated, not putting much effort in, and decreasing productivity, which increases unit cost because of the decreased output. So hopefully that makes some kind of sense. External diseconomies of scale, that's the one on the bottom right there. An example of this could be, obviously the industry is growing and the curve shifting outwards. As a factory, basically, as a industry grows so big, we've only got limited resources due to the basic economic problems. Why this course relates to F581 so much. Now, if there's a short supply, if there's a reduced supply, this will push up prices, and obviously the firm has to deal with that. The increased cost, and obviously that increased cost leads to reduced efficiency, which leads to diseconomies of scale. So that's the external one. So just to go over them four again. Internal, we said about the popcorn, the cinema chains, and we said about the airlines and the technical side of that. The external economies of scale, that one we talked about the resources and the people being trained to be put in that industry. Now the internal diseconomies of, obviously, the people being trained to put in the industry decreases increase their productivity, and decreases unit costs. Now we said for internal diseconomies of scale, we said it basically as the business gets so big it needs to employ more people in the hierarchy, which communications get distorted, which takes more time, which time is money, so costs increase and diseconomies of scale set in. External diseconomies of scale, that's basically when we said about factors of production being limited or scarce, and that leading to a increase in the price, which decreases costs and therefore increases the effect of diseconomies of scale. So hopefully, as I said, that makes some kind of sense. I have waffled on for almost half an hour now, but as I said, hopefully that's been of some benefit to you and you've been able to withstand that. But any comments or any questions on what I've just said, please feel free to just give me a shout, or virtual shout, of course. Obviously, I wouldn't like to just someone shouting me in the street. Obviously, how famous I am now. But as I said, any questions or anything, just let me know, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. But I might have not a bit of time to do some other work as well. As I said, I'll be going through the rest of the course in the next few videos. So hopefully it's been beneficial, and we'll see you in the next video.